deserves to work in a workplace where they are not protected, where they are not feeling safe, and when they are subject to harassment, intimidation, and worse. That is why we have made that a commitment of this government, and it's also a reflection of the reality that we've been talking about for many, many months now of systemic discrimination.
That's the Prime Minister on the RCMP. In a new report, they call the RCMP a toxic workplace, encouraging or tolerating racism, misogyny, homophobia. It's not just a few bad apples, according to a new report. It's systemic. That is the summary of an explosive report by the independent assessor, former Supreme Court Justice Michel Bastarache. He revealed that today. He'd interviewed 644 RCMP employees, current and former. His findings are chilling. This is the consequence, of course, of the Merlo-Davidson settlement agreement. Let me remind you of that. 2,304 women received compensation from that settlement out of a total of 3,086 claims. The government has paid out $137.4 million. For its part, Bastarache now calls for an independent study of the RCMP to identify where it's gone wrong, how it's systemically failed women. And after so many promises, though, like this is not the first thing, that Merlo-Davidson goes back to 1974. What needs to happen now? We did ask the RCMP Commissioner, Brenda Lucki, to join us. She was unavailable. But we want to bring on one of the lead lawyers in the RCMP class action lawsuit, David Klein. He's the managing partner at Klein Lawyers. Mr. Klein, thank you for joining us. And I want to hear your response to a staggering report, because you've heard firsthand reports of sexual assault, harassment, homophobia. Did Justice Bastarache give a fair assessment of the culture that he says prevails inside the RCMP?
Oh, he absolutely did. We were very pleased to see the report come out. It shines a light on something that those within the RCMP have known for many years. There was nothing in that report that surprised me. It still shocks me. Those of us who have been working on the case I've been working on the case for 8 years now, have lived it. We've heard the hundreds and hundreds of stories from women who were subjected to sexual harassment, unwanted touching, discrimination. It goes as far as rape. It just completely ground them down. So the report is a fair report. It's an accurate description of the things we've been hearing for years. And we welcome the fact that it's now public and that Justice Bastarache has made those recommendations.
The RCMP have responded, and I'm intrigued what you think. They said, we know we can't do it alone. Challenging and addressing systemic barriers, including sexism, racism, and all forms of unacceptable practice, requires engagement and consultation with those affected. What does that mean? And after years of denial, people have known about this for decades, and you know that, sir. I've reported on this stuff for a long time. What do you make of the fact that this is how the RCMP has responded, and what do you think they ought to do now?
So the response is a little bit disappointing. I did hear Commissioner Lucki talk about coming into this position so that she could effect real change. But Justice Bastarache has made it clear that this issue has been acknowledged and studied for decades. It's not a secret. It's not a secret within the force, and it's not a secret to the public. There have been a myriad of public reports that document systemic misogyny, systemic racism, systemic homophobia within the force, and a host of recommendations. What Justice Bastarache observes, and that we have observed and our clients have talked about, is that the time for internal initiatives is over. Something external has to happen. What we were hoping for was that today there would be a signal that there is going to be an external review, and it has to be more than just a review. It has to be a review. It has to be the development of change initiatives, and very importantly, there has to be external oversight of those change initiatives to make sure that this time something meaningful actually happens.
But now she said there's going to be a new independent Center for Harassment resolution will be in place by the summer of 2021. What do you make of that?
That's an important first step. There's no question. You know, a lot of the women who came forward to us because they didn't feel safe coming forward and filing harassment complaints within the RCMP. Keep in mind that for every woman who came forward, every one of those 2,000 who filed a claim, there's at least one more, and probably many more who did not come forward. For many of them, they were so beaten down, the experience was so traumatic that they just weren't able to file claims, or they were too ill to file claims, or they died before this opportunity became available. So this is an enormous problem. And although an external harassment and grievance review is an important first step, and it will be very helpful, it's going to take so much more to change the culture within the force.
I want to talk about changing the culture because RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki has admitted in the past that she has, quote, struggled with the definition of systemic racism. Justice Bastrash specifically said this is a systemic issue. It is not a few bad apples. She didn't even know a couple months ago what that definition was. What does that tell you?
So it is troubling. You know, one of the things that I can tell you is that this class action, the Merlot-Davidson class action, dealt primarily with women who were in policing roles. There's a second case that's in the settlement administration phase right now for the municipal employees, the contractors, the volunteers who number in the thousands who have a similar opportunity. Because of COVID, the take-up rate has been very low, and we're hoping that this publicity encourages women to come forward and make the claims that they're entitled to. But, you know, you mentioned racism, and my firm has a third action. We have Merlot-Davidson, we have the municipal employees case, and we have a racism class action. And it came to fore because of the lack of acknowledgement that this is a problem. If you look carefully at the Bastrash report, what he identifies is that it starts with recruitment and training. And the training process in the RCMP is one where they break down the individual and then put the pieces back together to put them into a mold that is the RCMP mold. He identifies this as highly problematic because breaking them down means humiliating them, belittling them, identifying their weaknesses and tearing them down. And so these people, the people who come out of that process carry that with them for the rest of their career. That's viewed as normative. Bullying, belittling, humiliating, that becomes normative conduct. Right. It's a broken system.
Yeah, that's interesting. He does talk about that. So it's almost like a hazing ritual. Again, Mr. Klein, I appreciate you. I appreciate your work and for shedding light on the Bastrash report today. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.